Welcome to No Apologies. I'm Dana Lash. The vaccination plan was going so well by our betters in legacy media and the Biden administration. And the plan went something like this. You hype up the threat of COVID at every single turn. You never, ever reassure people of well-established facts, like your kids are very safe from this virus, as in kids are more likely to perish in car accidents on the way to school. But ignore all data like this, because at every turn, got to dial up the fear. And ignore that most people who do die have comorbidities. And that's often, sadly, it's often those who are morbidly obese and disproportionately old. Talk down any cheap therapeutic and you destroy any doctor's reputation who advocates for early treatment. You pretend that adverse reactions to vaccines don't really exist, and you never point out inconsistencies coming from health agencies, from people like Dr. Fauci of the NIH and Rochelle Walensky of the CDC. And above all else, the plan requires that you pound the message into everybody's head day after day after day that the only way out of the pandemic is for every last human being on earth to get vaccinated. No excuses, no exemptions, no exceptions. Natural immunity doesn't count. But then our betters in legacy media and government ran into a problem. Some of the very bright people with cultural influence started asking questions about this. And even worse, some of these very likable and intelligent celebrities are not shy about telling people that, yes, heaven forbid, they are not vaccinated. Now, this is something that our betters probably did not expect nor plan for. Two such people recently emerged and are really throwing a wrench into this whole everybody has to get vaxxed narrative. First up, Jonathan Isaac and Bradley Beal of the NBA. In fact, a number of NBA players are doing the unthinkable. They're using critical thinking and they're speaking out. Now, here's Jonathan Isaac explaining very politely and civilly, as people in our government ought to copy, his hesitancy to get the vaccine. Watch.
I've had COVID in the past, and so our understanding of antibodies, of natural immunity has changed a great deal from the onset of the pandemic, and is still evolving. I understand that the vaccine would help if you catch COVID, and you'll be able to have less symptoms from contracting it. But with me having COVID in the past and having antibodies with my current age group and physical fitness level, it's not necessarily a fear of mine. Taking the vaccine, like I said, it would decrease my chances of having a severe reaction, but it does open me up to the, albeit rare chance, but the possibility of having an adverse reaction to the vaccine itself. I don't believe that being unvaccinated means infected, or being vaccinated means uninfected. You can still catch COVID with or without not having the vaccine. I would say, honestly, the craziness of it all, in terms of not being able to say that it should be everybody's fair choice without being demeaned or talked crazy to, doesn't make one comfortable to do what said person is telling them to do. I'm hesitant at this time, but at the end of the day, I don't feel that it is anyone's reason to come out and say, well, this is why or this is not why. It should just be their decision, and loving your neighbors, not just loving those that agree with you or look like you or move in the same way that you do. It's loving those who don't.
I feel like I'm sitting in church going, amen, hallelujah. I feel like I'm like nodding along with everything that he's saying. And this is like the 7th time I've watched this clip. I'm not even joking. I mean, how polite was that? He very calmly explained. I mean, he's had it before. And he very calmly explained his reasoning. Now, here's Bradley Beal Monday in a press conference doing what smart people do when things don't make sense. He asks questions, right? Because that's what people who want answers do, is they ask questions. Watch.
Every player, every person in this world is going to make their own decision for themselves. I would like an explanation to, people with vaccines. Why are they still getting COVID? If that's something that we are supposed to highly be protected from. Like, it's funny that, it reduces your chances of going to the hospital. It doesn't eliminate anybody from getting COVID.
That's like my point, right? That's like what we've all been asking. He just did it so succinctly right there. So apparently, not everyone's happy about this, particularly Rolling Stone. They're very unhappy that these young men are demonstrating that they're asking questions, they're speaking out, they're making statements very politely and civilly. None of them did so with any kind of nasty attitude. So to get these free thinkers back in line and maybe on narrative, they put out this ridiculous hit piece. I couldn't even get past like the second paragraph. The headline reads, quote, "The NBA's anti-vaxxers are trying to push around the league and it's working," end quote. Anti-vaxxers. The subheadline reads, "Conspiracy theories in the locker room, masked police in the arena, superstars trying to avoid the shot. After bringing back the culture from COVID, basketball confronts its own civil war," end quote. Oh, wow. That's like a pun intended, I'm sure. Or maybe not, Rolling Stone. I mean, maybe kind of, I don't know. Were you aware of just like how heavy that phrase was? Oh my gosh. And they paint, in this piece, they paint these NBA players who are asking legitimate questions that, by the way, there are no answers to. And they think for themselves. And they're doing what they, and I mean, for crying out loud, Jonathan Isaacs has had it already. So he would have natural immunity, right? But they're painting them as being anti-vax. Did you hear any one of them say that they were anti-vaccine? They're painting them as conspiracy theorists or selfish. But what else would you expect? To listen to these players is to get an earful of reason and rationality. Like, can we get one of these guys to run the CDC? I know it would be a huge salary cut, but here's NBA player Jonathan Isaac, again, being asked about the Rolling Stone article. Now, Jonathan Isaac, who is a Christian, was also one of the very few players who would not kneel during the national anthem. And watch how well he comports himself and explains his position when he was asked about this piece. Watch.
I was pretty badly misrepresented in the Rolling Stone article. And because of that, I can understand anyone who may say they don't transparently or overtly trust the media. I'm not anti-vax. I'm not anti-medicine. I'm not anti-science. I thank God, I'm grateful that I live in a society where vaccines are possible and we can protect ourselves and have the means to protect ourselves in the first place. I think that we're all different. We all come from different places. We've all had different experiences and hold dear to different beliefs. And what it is that you do with your body when it comes to putting medicine in there should be your choice, free of the ridicule and the opinion of others.
Isn't it sad that even to offer dissenting opinion, you have to butter up the other side to the nth degree? The NBA, by the way, announced today that they're going to withhold pay from unvaccinated players who miss any games. And apparently, NBA players, everybody from Knicks to Nets to Warriors, anybody who is not vaccinated, they're not even going to be able to play in home games. So this decision is one that will cost some of these young men something, yet they're speaking out. I mean, again, I would love it if they were actually, let's just like disband WHO, the World Health Organization, and just have these guys walk out and be like, all right, this is what's up. This is what we know and what we don't know. You want to get it, go get it. Or maybe, I don't know, just run for president. It'd be better than anybody in this cabinet at this point. If we had sanity back into policy decisions, we might actually end the pandemic. But why are the NBA players' arguments so rational and clear and yet no one's taking them seriously? Contrast their reasoning, by the way, with that of our policymakers. Like, why does Anthony Fauci come off so confused and yet condescending all at the same time? Like when someone asks him why we don't consider natural immunity as part of the solution, not just the vaccine. Watch this.
Jay, I don't have a really firm answer for you on that. That's something that we're going to have to discuss regarding the durability of the response.
So Fauci, who the media treats like some magic oracle, doesn't have an answer about the efficacy of natural immunity after a lifetime of working with viruses and pandemics? He's the chief talking head for the National Institute of Health and works with infectious diseases, and he doesn't know? Now, Jonathan Isaac had an answer about natural immunity, an NBA player, and it's backed by science. We all understand it to be true, but Fauci doesn't have an answer? And we're supposed to listen to this guy who actually won't speak the truth that we all know of because he's so terrified of contradicting the administration? He's one of the highest paid federal government officials, and either he doesn't understand natural immunity and how it's a very real part of the pandemic solution, or he wants to lie to you about it. In any case, there's some fault here. Our narrative makers suddenly have a problem because these celebrities are not conspiracy theorists. They can't be brushed off like that. They have very clearly well-defined and thought through rational responses and questions about these vaccines and about mandates. And the media would like for you to think that Bradley Beal has walked back his position because, again, heaven forbid that people assert bodily autonomy and basic human rights. But Bradley Beal hasn't walked a single thing back. Here he is clarifying his position. He is simply advocating for the right of a person to make their own decision. Watch.
When I stated yesterday, like I believe what I say. It's my opinion. The why is personal, but also along those lines, also said that I'm still considering getting the vaccine. So one thing I want to get clear is that I'm not sitting up here advocating or campaigning that, no, you should not get that vaccine. I'm not doing that. I'm not sitting up here doing that. Not sitting up here doing. I want to get that straight. I am not sitting up here saying vaccines are bad. I'm not sitting up here saying that this vaccine's bad. I'm not sitting up here saying that you shouldn't get it. It is a personal decision between every individual. That's it.
The end. And by the way, the whys of his decision is none of the damn business that any of the people that are in that room asking him questions, nor is it the business that anybody else in this country or elsewhere on this green planet. It is no one else's business. What in the world happened to my body, my choice? What happened to keeping the government out of your private and personal decisions? Whatever happened to that? Whatever happened to the whole thing that we were sold with Obamacare back in 08 and 09 that, oh, well, this is going to be, you have to have all of this to be you and your doctor. All your decisions will be there. You can keep your doctor if you like them. No, nothing. This is nobody's business. And his was a very reasonable and defensible position. And this, frankly, that's the American position because it's about defending bodily autonomy and people's rights to make actual health decisions for themselves as to whether or not they want to get an injection. And defending people's right to think and to question when things don't make sense. And it's not just NBA players, people that pundits can't brush off as being conspiracy theorists that are speaking up. There's the Victoria's Secrets model whose name I will not ever be able to pronounce. Doubts and Crows, I'm pretty sure that's it. Dutes and Crows, I don't know. I only became aware of her when Giselle defended her. But she has no plans to get vaccinated. And she said this to her 6.8 million followers on social media. Quote, she says, I will not be forced to take the shot. I will not be forced to prove my health to participate in society. I will not accept exclusion of people based on their medical status, end quote. She's literally saying she will not engage in discrimination. And she was viciously attacked because she would not engage in discrimination because she's off narrative. And that's not allowed in America anymore. Now, her friend and fellow model, Giselle Bundchen, stepped in and came to her defense saying, quote, I know Dowdson. I know she's a kind and loving person. I can't believe the hate being directed at her because she expressed her feelings. It saddens me to see all the judgment and the lack of empathy in so many people's hearts. Hate is not the answer, end quote. And she's 1,000% right. So why are models and NBA players and pop stars making way more sense than policymakers, right? Not one of these people are anti-vax. You can sit here and call them that all you want to. It's a completely illiberal and anti-intellectual argument. It all seems to be more about anti-judgmentalness and anti-exclusion and anti-censorship and anti-segregation and anti-authoritarianism. But I don't hear any anti-vax sentiments coming from any of these people, which, just to be clear, that's someone who's against all vaccinations. These are vaccine-hesitant celebrities who are hesitant about this specific injection, asking unanswered, legitimate questions and making legitimate observations. And they're incredibly brave to do so because we live in a bully society of trash people. And we should applaud these people for speaking their minds because by doing so, they're speaking up for 80 million Americans who share their very legitimate concerns. But again, our betters, who seem to be in control of the media and the narratives, must be breaking out in a cold sweat at this point. The plan was going so well. Anyone who lifted their head up to ask a question would get slaughtered in an onslaught of media attacks. But in the new media world, legacy media only matters so much. CNN's reach is a few million. Nicki Minaj's reach is in the 100s of millions. And celebrities like Minaj are asking the same questions. And of course they're getting attacked for them. And here is Rihanna. Look at her t-shirt. Interesting statement, is it not? And very clearly intentional. So you have powerful people with massive influence that reaches far beyond that of the legacy press. They're thinking and asking questions and making observations and statements as they should and have every right to, as we all should, regardless of whether or not you agree with it. I love how we have these self-appointed apostles in our society and these self-appointed saviors who think that what their belief in the veracity of someone else's expressed opinion is what legitimizes that opinion. That's a garbage thought from trash people. So every one of us not only has a right to ask questions, but has an obligation to do so. Because at the end of the day, it's not even about the vaccine, really. It's about your right to control your healthcare choices. It's about your right, as Rihanna is pointing out, to think for yourself. I mean, do we all understand what's happening here? Our policymakers have not made a cogent case for mass universal vaccination. Their logic for this particular vaccine is tied in knots. It's fallen apart, particularly during the Delta wave, in which we discovered that it wasn't working as it was sold. We are told that this is mandated and companies may be put out of business with fines. But yet, if you're going to do something like that, don't you think that the injection ought to be an inoculation more than a therapeutic? And that if someone's going to mandate it, that the government responsible for mandating it also is responsible for assuming the liability for any adverse reactions? I don't care how rare they are. Don't you think the government should assume the responsibility of any adverse reactions and the liability for that if there is one, since they're going to mandate it? That, at the very least, should be answered. And experts, they can answer simple questions, like Anthony Fauci not being able to answer the question about natural immunity, which is likely better protection than the vaccination. I haven't seen a study that disproves this. Yet despite this, they won't grant any exemptions, not even to pregnant women who have concerns, not to anybody with a religious concern. No, nobody, no matter what, no matter the circumstance. The media should be asking why, but they don't. Instead, what they do is they attack the people who do. Now, I don't worship celebrities like the media does, but I am very interested in watching people that have way more influence than our press kind of overpower the press on this narrative. And I know that it must be very vexing for legacy media and our policymakers to deal with these celebrities who are asking very tough and fair questions and making very legitimate observations. And they're reminding everybody that millions of us are asking these same questions too. And maybe that's what our betters in the legacy media and government really hate, because there's a narrative they want to preserve and it doesn't stand up to scrutiny very well. And they have to destroy anybody who asks a singular question or challenges that narrative. And with these cultural influencers who have very big platforms, they're making it very difficult to preserve that narrative because they're making too much sense. They're doing so rationally and calmly and without impugning the character of anyone who disagrees with them. And by doing this, they're making more and more people realize that their questions are legitimate and their hesitancy is understandable. And it's making more people realize something is very off. It's also making it clear that it's the other side that is entirely intolerant, these neo-little Puritans, and it's entirely not inclusive at all for all their compassionate talk. Folks like the NBA's Kareem Abdul-Jabbar saying things like this about players like Isaac and Beal, quote, "I don't think that they're behaving like good teammates or good citizens. This is a war that we're involved in, and masks and vaccines, they're the weapons that we use to fight this war," end quote. If they're the weapons that you use to fight a war, that's basically like giving you a gun that doesn't have a magazine or a firing pin and actually doesn't do anything except maybe you can whip somebody with the butt of it, or it's a fancy paperweight. That's kind of it. And it also presupposes that these things do something that they were sold as doing, but don't actually do it. There's a difference between inoculation and therapeutics and reducing the severity of symptoms. We were sold one thing, it's doing another, and then we're blamed for asking questions about it. Get bent. It's judgmental. Shaming tactics like those comments from Jabbar that reveal the weakness of their arguments. Shaming, exclusion, and judgmentalness, these are the tactics of authoritarians. I don't have enough middle fingers on my hands for this and for those people who do it. These are the tools of tyranny and control. These are the weapons of choice for authoritarians because their narratives are built on lies. And remember, good governments and good parents and good teachers, good scientists, good doctors, good societies, they encourage questions. And they respect your freedom to determine what you're going to inject in your body. It's officials and elites up to no good that freak out when you ask a question or assert your bodily autonomy. So let's hope that more of these cultural influencers and celebrities, they can ask as many questions as they want to. They can ask it for those who are canceled for doing so. And I hope they continue speaking up. And as they say, don't ever bend the knee. So coming up, I know that Democrats said that the reconciliation bill and the Build Back Better bill, there's all kinds of garbage, that it's going to, the Build Back Better, the $3.5 trillion per trillion, whatever, it's going to cost America $0. That's a lie. We're going to break all that down, and maybe Stephen Moore with FreedomWorks can tell me what tree equity is next. Keep it here. Thanks to Biden's economic policies, job numbers have been abysmal, inflation is increasing, and everything's horrible. Instead of following the previous president's pro-business agenda and understanding of math that had our economy booming, this administration wants to tax corporations out of business and pass trillion-dollar bills that we can't pay for. So it's time to take some proactive steps to protect your wealth in retirement and by investing in gold and precious metals. And Legacy Precious Metals can help you. Washington prints money to pay for outrageous bills, but all that does is devalue your dollar. So gold offers you a hedge against inflation, and as the dollar gets weaker, gold gets stronger. My friends at Legacy Precious Metals are the gold standard when it comes to investing in precious metals, and they have a team of experts who can counsel you on the best options for you and your family. So don't leave your retirement to chance. Call Legacy Precious Metals at 866-580-2088 or visit them online to download their free investor's guide full of useful information. You can find that at legacypminvestments.com. Democrats want to spend $3.5 trillion and say that it costs $0. I think we all learned better in school. It's kind of amazing. But it will cost money because the law of economics still exists. W Emord is the chairman for the FreedomWorks Task Force on Economic Revival and author of Trumponomics, and he joins me now to discuss. Stephen, it's so good to see you. And I have to say, out of all of the stories that I've ever heard the left tell, something that costs $3.5 trillion that actually costs $0, I think is the winner for all time. Your thoughts?
Well, the American people have really been kind of laughing at this comment that not just Joe Biden, but Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, said the same thing, that why are people complaining? This is free. And there's two problems with that, Dana. Number one, the bill really actually costs about $5 trillion in terms of the massive increase in debt spending. And there's estimated to be about $2.5 to $3 trillion of taxes. So this isn't paid for. Where does the other $2.5 trillion come from? Obviously, it is going to be through debt. But the other thing is, let's say the whole thing was paid for by taxes. How does that mean it's free? I mean, if you and I have to pay more taxes, how does that make it free to us? So I think it was a dumb thing for the president and the speaker to say. They keep saying it, by the way, even though it's become, even on the late night comedy shows, they're making fun of it.
Yeah, and from what I understand too, Stephen, when they were passing that tax package portion through House Ways and Means, what did they discover? Like, it doesn't even come like halfway to even the increase in taxes to covering the cost of this. And you're right. I mean, it really is actually closer to $5 trillion. So how else do they expect that they're going to get this money? Because then it seems like they have to go to other actual, maybe constitutionally mandated projects that the government is allowed through the enumerated powers to spend money on. So is that what we're looking at? Where are they going to take this money from?
Well, there's a second lie that might be a lot more serious than the first one, which is just recited day after day after day by the Democratic leaders and the president, which is that only people who make over $400,000 will pay for this. Well, no, sorry. The Wall Street Journal did a piece the other day showing that even if you took all the money from every billionaire in America, every penny that they have, that still wouldn't pay for this multi-trillion-dollar bill. And now they have things like car taxes. They have a carbon tax, which is an energy tax in this bill. So I guess the left thinks that people, make less than $400,000 don't have cars and don't turn on the light bulbs. I mean, the point is this is going to affect everyone. Dana, I've been in this game a long time. You have too. I think this is the most financially reckless bill, the most dangerous bill for our economy that I've seen in the 35 years I've been involved in policy. It is going to cause massive inflation. I think it could cause a financial crisis for our country that would make what 2008 and 9 look like to be a picnic. I mean, no country, show me any time in the world where a country has been able to borrow and spend and tax its way to prosperity. It just doesn't happen. But that is the formula here.
And you brought up a very interesting, another good point too, when you were discussing the mileage tax, et cetera. I mean, here we're watching fuel prices increase. I was reading just how this week Boris Johnson and the UK leaders were calling out the British Army because there were so many lines, there were such long lines at gas pumps, and they were having a fuel shortage. And we're talking about supply chain shortages, and inflation, on the brink of inflation. So having a mileage tax on top of all of this, I don't know how they get away with saying that it's not going to affect anybody under $400,000, because those people are going to be affected the most.
Of course. And by the way, this is a little bit Orwellian. The government's going to put a gadget on your car that's going to tell the government how many miles you're traveling and also where you're going. They'll be able to use this to track people. And I hope people don't think we're trying to exaggerate here. I mean, what you've gotten, like in New Zealand now, they have all these lockdown orders, and people got arrested the other day for going to McDonald's or Popeyes. I mean, the governments are out of control in terms of taking away the liberties of people. And then you look at, here's the other thing, Dana. Do you know how many pages this bill is?
2,460 something, and
Yes.
I admittedly have not read all of it.
Yeah, you had it. Very good. I'm impressed. By the way, when's the last time, Damien, you read a 2,500 page book, right? I mean, how many members of Congress are even going to read this bill? And I guarantee you the number of that is pretty close to zero. And I'll guarantee you something else. As we're right now, our group, because we're running a big coalition to try to defeat this bill, we're scouring through this bill, reading the fine print. And there is unbelievable amounts of special interest giveaways to liberal groups. There's a $1 billion slush fund for liberal organizations. It's called for community organizations, which we mean, means basically the unions. It means, People for the American Way and the pro-abortion groups and so on. And that's $1 billion they're going to give to these organizations. That's more than all the right-wing groups in the country have. So how about this? They want to make the labor union dues. They want to make those tax deductible. Gee, that's a nice wet kiss for the labor bosses. They want to give a special tax break. I'm not making this up. They want to give us special tax breaks to reporters. Why would they want to do that? Oh yeah, maybe it's because the media is in their hip pocket.
And of course, you can't forget about the tree equity.
Tree equity. How about this one? I'm not making this stuff up. Tree equity is a good one. How about this one? There is a $3 or $4 million program to study the effects of climate change on pregnant women.
Oh, wow. That's okay. That beats tree equity. You saw my tree equity and you raised it climate change on pregnant women. I don't know if I'm sure there's another card that's even bigger than that buried in this bill. And that's the thing. None of these people have read it. It's all these crazy lobbyists that get together and they write this bill. And then these lawmakers just kind of trust sort of what they're given. Do you think, and I know that it's a fight right now and there's a Manchin problem and a Sinema problem. What is the fate of, because something's going to pass. They want to avert a government shutdown, which I'm completely fine with having a shutdown, by the way. They want to avert a government shutdown. But what do you think is what are they honestly going to walk away with? Something will likely pass.
Right now, it is a train wreck in Washington. Train wreck. I mean, the Democrats are in complete disarray. It's total chaos because they're trying to force Republicans to vote for this. And the Republicans, quite correctly, are saying, hell no, we're not going to vote for trillions and trillions of more debt, trillions of more taxes that are going to destroy our economy. We're not going to vote to strangle our domestic energy industry. We're not going to vote for the highest tax rates that would go higher to China. I mean, how much time have you got? I could go through all the horrid features of this bill. But my point is the Democrats don't have their act together right now. The Democrats are trying to force the Republicans to vote for a debt ceiling increase. And I've got to do a shout out to Mitch McConnell. I don't always agree with Mitch McConnell. I like the man. I think he's a smart guy. In this case, he was 100% correct. Not one Republican should vote to raise the debt ceiling when it's all the Democrats who want to do. They're the ones who want to spend these trillions of dollars and borrow these trillions of dollars. Dana, tell me why if you read the Washington Post and New York Times, Republicans have a moral obligation to raise the debt ceiling. No, they don't. The better thing to do is just cancel all these spending bills. So McConnell brought down the budget bill this week, and the Democrats had to put their tail between their legs. They're going to have to pass a clean budget bill, but now they're going to have to put a $6 to $7 trillion debt increase in their massive $5 trillion spending bill. We're not making these numbers up. This is exactly what they intend to do, and I don't think they have the votes to get it done right now.
And which is amazing considering just how politically tribal it can be in DC and that they still don't have the votes. I think tells everybody how crazy this bill is and how awful it is. It's weird because we talk about, one last quick thing, Stephen, you were talking about, for instance, in this bill, they have the mileage tax thing. The government's going to be watching, basically where you go and, how many miles you're driving. But then, of course, empowering the IRS to go, I think it was started at $600 and now the threshold's $10,000. If you have that much in your bank account, every single transaction that you make is going to be under the watchful eye of the IRS. we joked about this kind of stuff in the past, and now we're actually having a serious conversation about it because they wrote it in legislation. Did you think this day would come?
So I'm glad I forgot to mention the bank account issue. That has Americans angry as hornets right now. Is it $600? I think it is. I mean, virtually that's every American. Most every American has a bank account with at least $600, and that means they're going to be able to know about virtually every financial transaction you make. I mean, that is Orwellian. That's 1984 kind of stuff. I don't want the government to know. Don't we have financial privacy anymore in this country? I mean, come on.
What about the Fourth Amendment?
I'm angry about it. I know the American people are. And it's not just rich people who have accounts with $600.
Right. Exactly. And I agree with you. This is dangerous. All of these proposals, and we'll be watching them. Hopefully they will crash and fail. I'd rather government shut down and these planes crash and fail than something like this passes because they feel the hurried need to do it so they don't get bad mentions in the press. But we'll see. Well, Stephen Moore, always appreciate your insight.
Say this. We got to kill the bill. This is the most important thing for the conservative free market movement in my 35 years. I think we've got some momentum. We need everybody on board. Tell your friends, tell your colleagues, tell your family, tell everyone how horrible this bill is. We don't need it. The economy is going to be fine without it. We need to start bringing our debt down, not raising it. Every child born today, by the time they're 30, will have a $350,000 share of the national debt if we pay this bill. Is that the legacy we want to leave for our children?
That's unbelievable. Stephen Moore, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much for your eyes on this and alerting to everyone else of it as well. Thank you so much. Good to see you.
Thank you, Dana. Take care.
All right, folks, coming up, one of the laws of big government policies is unintended consequences. So, of course, vaccine mandates, they are backfiring in some pretty spectacular ways. Constitutional law attorney Jonathan Emord will join me next to discuss. Stay here. Black Rifle Coffee Company is a veteran-owned coffee company serving premium coffee to people who love America. And they develop their explosive roast profiles with the same mission focus that they've learned while serving our great nation. With every purchase you make, Black Rifle Coffee gives back. So in 2020, they donated over 6 million cups of coffee to veteran, law enforcement, and first responder causes. Their high-quality coffee beans are imported all the way from Colombia and Brazil and then carefully roasted at their facilities in Tennessee and Utah. They even have a signature roast called Lava Panther that's directly sourced from a small farm in Guatemala. So although the temperatures are cooling off, don't forget to keep enjoying the great outdoors fueled by Black Rifle Coffee. And the best way to do it is with the Black Rifle Coffee Club. And when you join, they get your chosen brew all roasted, packaged, and shipped right up to your door. And you can get special discounts as well and get access to exclusive products. So purchase at blackriflecoffee.com/Dana and use code DanaTV at checkout for 20% off your purchase and your first coffee club order. Mandating vaccines is causing some very real systemic breakdowns. Jonathan W. Emord is a constitutional law attorney and author of The Authoritarians, which almost sounds like a cool band name until you realize the reality of what he's discussing. He joins me now to discuss all the ramifications of these crazy vaccine mandate policies, and really, I'm sure we're going to see some litigation to come. Jonathan, thanks so much for joining us. Really good to see you. Where to start? There's a million questions because, and you had a great piece, I have to say. You have a great piece in Town Hall where you were getting into whether it was Fifth Amendment protections. You were also talking about Jacobson v. Massachusetts. And now we hear today that the fines could be for companies that are not mandating vaccine or who are not requiring employees to be vaccinated, anywhere from like $70,000 to $700,000, depending on the severity and I guess repetition of the insubordination, for the lack of a better way to put it. What legal challenges is this administration going to be facing by doing this to these businesses? I don't know that I've ever seen the federal government require businesses to do anything like this before.
Well, we, for example, have had probably over a dozen calls from different companies and individuals who wish to contest this. And I understand that there's likely to be hundreds of lawsuits. This may have the largest number of lawsuits filed against any federal action in American history. It really does appear that an overwhelming number of suits will be filed by employees, employers, and by the states. Some 14 states are likely to sue. So they're just all waiting for the issuance of this order by OSHA. And it's fraught with enormous problems, constitutional and statutory problems that are likely to cause this thing to end up, rather than being a brick wall, it'll be more like Swiss cheese by the time it's over.
Yeah, and one of those big issues that you brought up were those individuals that had already had coronavirus. They have natural immunity, and yet that's not being factored into this equation. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, if you take, there are many legal challenges that are constitutional and statutory, but even if you assume that the administration has the power to do this in the first instance, which I doubt, under Section 6C1 of the OSHA Act, they have to establish two things which they simply cannot do under the precedent. First is they have to establish a grave danger is presented in the workplace by employees who are not vaccinated to employees who are. The problem with that is, as you're pointing out, clearly those with natural immunity don't pose a grave danger to those who are vaccinated. Clearly those who are working from home remotely don't pose a grave danger to anybody. People working outside don't pose a grave danger to anybody. And people who are working, truck drivers and so forth, who work alone are not posing a grave danger to anybody. So of the 100 million people affected by this, a good number of people cannot be established to pose a grave danger. And then in addition, the government has to establish that this emergency temporary standard they're adopting through OSHA is necessary to protect employees from a grave danger. And that clearly, under the precedent, it means that if there's an alternative that would suffice just as well, the government hasn't established the necessity of the move. And there are numerous things employers can do to limit risks to other employees. And then you've got this ambient fact throughout the entire workforce, which is most of the people in the workforce are under 65 and are healthy and are simply not likely to get severe disease. And the courts have defined grave danger to be a lethal threat. So I don't believe they meet the standard. And I should point out that of the last six instances in which OSHA has invoked this emergency temporary standard, the courts have struck it down in 4 instances and have held it only partially applicable in 1 other. So it doesn't have a good track record, and it really looks vulnerable.
And that's, which is good news, of course, to people who maybe still have questions that they would like answered, or maybe they just want to retain a little bit of bodily autonomy. One of the questions as well that I see discussed quite a bit is the issue of liability for adverse reactions. And this is something I've talked about this on radio. We've talked about it here in the separate hour. And I realize that this is established law. I realize it's very difficult actually to get the government to even if you do suffer an adverse reaction to get any kind of payout. And we've talked about that. And I understand also the need for pharmaceutical companies in rare instances like this, when you're dealing with a pandemic, to be able to speedily come up with something. But to me, that suggests that the issue to which that would respond to is far more serious than the fatality ratio that we're dealing with here with this virus. And furthermore, if you're going to have a federal mandate, shouldn't the federal government, and I don't know where the law would come in on this particular part of it, shouldn't the federal government have some sort of plan B for liability in those rare instances of adverse reactions?
Yes, it's peculiar that they've really insulated the companies that make these drugs from virtually any liability associated with the adverse reactions. And that is even more profound a problem in this case, because there are more adverse reactions associated with the COVID vaccine than any other vaccine, and then all vaccines combined. So it's a real problem, these adverse reactions. It's not a myth. It's happening every day. People are dying from the vaccine. People are suffering adverse effects. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody who gets a vaccine will have that effect, but it does mean that it's significant enough so that it's more commonplace with this vaccine than any other in our history.
And still so many unanswered questions about it. Boy, this is going to be an ongoing fight. I can see lasting for years. Jonathan Emord, so appreciate your expert perspective on this. Thanks so much for giving us some of your time today. We appreciate it. All right, folks, coming up, the death of comedy. We'll discuss that next. Stay with us. How much equity do you have in your home? Cybercrime experts are alerting homeowners that the more equity you have, the greater the chance that criminals may target you. Home title theft is one of the fastest growing crimes in the country, and Home Title Lock, America's leader in home title protection, is warning homeowners that they could potentially be victims and be completely unaware. So cyber thieves can search hundreds of public databases for high equity homes. They can find your home's online title, forge your signature stating that you sold your home, and then take out loans with your equity. Insurance or common identity theft programs won't cover you. So protect your most valuable asset. Register your address to see if you could potentially be a victim and receive a complete title history of your home at $100 value for free. Visit HometitleLock.com. Have you ever noticed how tyrannical societies produce just crap art? Think about it. The Soviet Union. Do you remember any good rock albums that came out of Moscow? Or how about Cuba? They produce any good comedies? North Korea makes movies because Kim Jong-un is fond of them. That's it. They've yet to win an Oscar, as though we would use that as a measure. But we're not holding our breath for the creativity of tyrants down in North Korea. So why is it that tyrannical states can't make art? Well, because ideology isn't funny. Think about wokeness. The ideology that is infecting America, is it funny? I mean, the woke have about as much of a sense of humor as your average zombie on The Walking Dead. These days, America is dominated by state narratives that can't be questioned, like mass universal vaccination or CRT, which is why things like comedy in America are just getting worse. I hate this bit. I hate this. This is the stupidest bit from Stephen Colbert, who generated his last recorded laugh about 5 years ago. See, what makes comedians, I mean, this is so cringe. What makes comedians and comedy funny is telling the truth about something. Comedy points out the elephant in the room. It says what you're not supposed to say. It can be uncomfortable, like South Park, which is hysterical, but you know it's true. Ideology doesn't allow for funny. There are aspects to COVID that can make for comedy, but only if you're willing to tell the truth about it. Jon Stewart shows us how it's done. Watch.
Science has, in many ways, helped ease the suffering of this pandemic, which was more than likely caused by science. There's a novel respiratory coronavirus overtaking Wuhan, China. What do? Oh, you know who we could ask? The Wuhan Novel Respiratory Coronavirus Lab. The disease is the same name.
Stephen Colbert seems stunned that Stewart would tell the truth. It was hysterical, and the audience ate it up. I mean, that was the most laughs that Stephen Colbert has ever gotten on that show as the host of that late night program. And it was with somebody else, a better host. As the state merges with corporations and corporate media in America, art has and will continue to suffer. Do you think AOC is funny? I mean, when you make fun of her, that's like one thing, but do you think she's like herself is funny? How about Nancy Pelosi? Only when she tries to smile and as she's eating her $27 like little bitty ice creams. Chuck Schumer, does he make you smile or laugh? What about Joe Biden? Is he funny? Actually, he is, but not on purpose. Like still, my favorite bit is the pool basement and the kids that rub his leg hair. My point is that government isn't funny, and ideological societies like communist countries aren't funny because if you laugh, they'll kill you, and because the people who run them aren't funny. Does Xi Jinping of China seem funny to you? I mean, people made fun of him when he got offended because someone compared him to Winnie the Pooh, so they banned Winnie the Pooh. That's funny. Xi Jinping is not funny. How about Nicolas Maduro of Venezuela or former KGB member Vladimir Putin, right? He's actually not funny, but him diving in the Baltic Sea and coming up with all of these brand new clean treasures that he just got from the bottom of the Baltic Sea because he's such an expert diver, that's funny. You get the point. Colbert's bit is awful because he's towing this ideological line for an administration that's increasingly tyrannical. Good art and good comedy challenges narratives and it mocks authoritarian politicians, but it doesn't carry their water. By the way, are you running out and getting your vax after watching Colbert humiliate himself like that? Is that a side effect? Do you act like him if you get the shot? Because hell to the no, am I going to get that if it means I have to dance, if you turn into that? And was he hallucinating? I don't know. Questions. I've never watched Colbert. That does it for us tonight. Thanks for tuning in. Good night, and don't bend the knee.